Hello. In this video, I will talk about Darius' first Scythian campaign, which took place in 513 BC. Darius I came to power in 522 BC after a long period of turmoil in the Persian state resulting from a conspiracy and the removal of the then ruler, the usurper Gaumata. From 522 to 516 BC, Darius had to suppress numerous uprisings in various parts of his vast empire and essentially restore the Persian state. Having restored peace and order in his state, Darius felt the need for a great victorious war that would unite the diverse tribes of his kingdom and serve as a test of the strength of this alliance. Diodorus Siculus describes his program as follows. After Darius had practically conquered all of Asia, he intended to subdue Europe. This desire was based on his confidence in the strength of the Persians. He believed it would be a disgrace if the kings, his predecessors, had defeated the strongest nations, while he, with powerful armies at his disposal, did not perform an act worthy of mention. So, in 513 BC, Darius I led his army to conquer Scythia. To reach the lands of the Scythians, they had to overcome several obstacles. The first was crossing the Bosporus. A bridge was constructed at the narrowest point of the Bosporus, 660 meters, for the Persian army to cross into Europe. Darius brought with him, as reported by Herodotus, a 700,000-strong army and a fleet of 600 ships equipped by Ionian Greeks. The army's numbers were clearly exaggerated, according to researchers, being at least five-fold lower. Next, they had to cross the full-flowing Danube. Darius ordered the Ionians to sail to the mouth of the Danube, then sail upriver for 2 days and begin building a bridge. The location was strategically chosen, known as the river's neck, where the Danube split into 2 branches. Along the way, Darius conquered the Getae, while the Odrysians, Syrians, and Nipsaeans acknowledged his authority without resistance. Having promptly added the militias of these tribes to his army, Darius finally approached the bridge, which had long been ready for crossing. Darius planned to traverse the land of the Scythians, conquer them, and return with his army to his homeland through the Caucasus Mountains. Therefore, after the army had crossed the Danube, he ordered the bridge to be destroyed and the detachments of the Ionian Greeks who had built the bridge to join the great army. But one of the leaders of the Ionians, the tyrant of the city of Melanchlaeni, advised the king to keep a route for retreat, since in a land with neither agriculture nor cities, any surprises were possible. Naturally, the king agreed with the sensible suggestion. After this, as Herodotus wrote, Darius tied 60 knots on a belt. Then he summoned the Ionian tyrants to a council and said to them, Ionians, I am rescinding my previous order regarding the bridge. Take this belt and do the following. As soon as you see that I have set out against the Scythians, from that time on, untie 1 knot each day. If I do not return by the time all the days indicated by the knots have passed, then sail back to your homeland. Meanwhile, since I have changed my decision, guard the bridge and do everything you can to preserve and protect it. It is clear that the main rivals of the Persians were the Royal Scythians, and it was their responsibility to repel the invasion. The Scythians were ruled by 3 kings, the elder Idanthyrsus, and the 2 younger ones, Scopasus and Taxacus. The kings of the Scythians convened an all-Scythian council, which was attended not only by representatives of all the tribes, but also by their neighbors, the Agathyrsi from the west, the Neuri, Androphagi, and Melanchlaeni from the north. From the south, the king of the Tauri, and finally, from the east, the leaders of the Geloni, Budini, and Sauromatai. Only these last three tribal unions promised to help the Royal Scythians. As for the others, they stated that the Persians had come to punish the Royal Scythians, who had previously invaded Persian lands, and that this war did not concern them. If the Persians attacked them, they would be able to repel them. Receiving such a response, the Scythians decided not to engage in open battle with the Persians. They began to retreat slowly, driving away livestock, filling in wells and springs, and destroying the grass on the ground. They divided their army into two detachments. The first, commanded by Scopasis, was joined by the Sauromatai. This detachment was to move along the coast of the Black and Azov Seas to the Don River, and if necessary, cross it. The main part of the army, led by Idanthyrsus and joined by the Geloni and Budini, was to hover near the Persian army, staying at a day's march distance from them. Their goal was to lure the Persians into the lands of the tribes that had refused to ally with the Royal Scythians, thereby drawing them into the war as well. The wagons with women and children, and all the livestock, except for the amount needed to feed the army, were sent far to the north. Both armies then set about their tasks. The Persians' path lay across a deserted plain, where the pastures had been burned by the Scythians and the streams filled in. The Scythians managed to lead the Persians into the lands of the Melanchlaeni, Androphagi, and Neuri. However, the Persians did not dare enter the land of the Agathyrsi, as they had sternly warned that they would fully engage in the war. Overall, the Persian army was significantly worn out by these utterly fruitless marches. The war was clearly dragging on, with no end in sight. Moreover, the Scythians did everything they could to keep the Persians occupied and prevent them from making a quick retreat. Occasionally, they left some livestock for the Persians, who would come, capture the animals, and each time feel proud of their success. This success was then followed by a long period of wandering, during which the Persian army suffered from hardship and deprivation. Eventually, Darius, in an attempt to prompt the Scythians into a decisive battle, sent a message to King Idanthyrsus. Here's the text as reported by Herodotus. "Fool, why do you keep fleeing when you have the option to choose? If you believe you can resist my power, stop running, cease your wandering, and fight me. If you acknowledge yourself as too weak, then you should also stop fleeing, and, bringing gifts of earth and water to your master, engage in negotiations with him." Idanthyrsus replied that he was wandering just as he had with the Scythians in peacetime. The Scythians would engage in battle when the Persians found their ancestral graves. But if that did not happen, the Scythians would fight whenever they deemed fit. In conclusion, the message read, "I recognize only Zeus and Hestia, the queen of the Scythians, as my sovereigns, and for calling yourself my master, you will pay dearly." Instead of gifts of earth and water, Idanthyrsus promised to send other gifts that Darius deserved. Indeed, soon a messenger from Idanthyrsus sent Darius the gifts of the Scythians: a bird, a mouse, a frog, and 5 arrows. The Persians asked the messenger what these gifts meant, but he replied that he was instructed only to deliver the gifts and return as quickly as possible. He added that if the Persians were wise enough, they should understand the meaning of these gifts themselves. Hearing this, the Persians convened a council. Darius believed that the Scythians were submitting to his power and bringing him symbols of their submission in the form of earth and water, as the mouse lives in the earth, eating its fruits like humans. The frog inhabits the water. The bird, with its swiftness, resembles a horse, and the arrows signify that the Scythians are giving up resistance. However, his closest adviser, Gobryas, Incidentally, one of the conspirators against Gaumata interpreted these gifts entirely differently. He explained their meaning as follows: "If you Persians do not fly to the sky like birds, or burrow into the earth like mice, or leap into the marshes like frogs, you will not return back struck by these arrows." After presenting the gifts to the king, the remaining Scythian detachments in their homeland, infantry and cavalry, advanced in battle formation to engage the Persians. As the Scythians stood in battle order, a hare suddenly ran through their ranks. Upon seeing the hare, the Scythians immediately started chasing it. When the Scythian ranks fell into disorder, and there was an uproar in their camp, Darius asked what the noise among the enemy meant. Learning that the Scythians were chasing a hare, Darius said to his close associates, with whom he usually conversed, "These people hold us in deep contempt, and it is now clear to me that Gobryas correctly interpreted the Scythian gifts. I see for myself the state of our affairs. We must return home." However, simply turning around and leaving was no longer an option. Everyone understood that the Scythians were unlikely to allow them to do this safely. Therefore, the Persians secretly left their camp at night, leaving all the fires burning and abandoning the weak soldiers, almost all their baggage, and tethered donkeys. The abandoned donkeys began to bray even louder after the army's retreat. Hearing the braying, the Scythians were entirely convinced that the Persians were still in the camp. In the morning, it became clear to the Scythians that the Persians had left. The two Scythian armies united and began the pursuit. However, since the Persian army consisted of both infantry and cavalry, it moved much more slowly than the Scythian force. Additionally, unfamiliar with the terrain, the Persian commanders chose a rather winding route. The Scythian cavalry, on the other hand, rushed towards the Danube by the shortest path. In short, the Scythian detachments did not find the Persian army near the Danube. Not finding the Persians, the Scythians turned to the Ionians, who had not yet destroyed the bridge, despite Darius being absent for more than 60 days. They proposed to the Greeks to destroy the bridge and thus gain their freedom, especially since this did not contradict Darius's orders. Herodotus reported on the council of Greek commanders. They were all tyrants in their cities. Initially, the opinion of Miltiades, the tyrant of Chersonese in Thrace, the future victor of the Persians at Marathon, prevailed. He suggested destroying the bridge and achieving freedom for the cities of Ionia. Histiaeus, the tyrant of Miletus, however, held a different view. According to him, each of them currently held tyranny in their cities by the grace of Darius. If Darius's power were to be broken, neither he, Histiaeus, nor anyone else would be able to maintain their rule over the city, as each city would prefer democratic rule over the dominion of a tyrant. This opinion was supported by all the participants in the council, who decided not to destroy the bridge. But how to achieve this? The Scythians were nearby and might resort to other, more forceful arguments. A part of the bridge was dismantled, and the Scythians, convinced that Darius would not be able to escape, set out to meet his army. However, the armies missed each other. The Scythians logically assumed that the Persians would return through territories untouched by war, as the army needed to be fed during the retreat. However, the Persians took the same route they had taken deeper into Scythia, despite these lands being completely ravaged. The Persians simply did not know another road, and even moving along this well-known route, they barely found the crossing point. They reached the location at night and discovered the bridge dismantled. Then the Persians were gripped by fear that they had been abandoned by the Ionians. Among Darius's entourage was an Egyptian With a very loud voice, Darius ordered this man to stand on the bank of the Danube and call for Histiaeus the Milesian. The Egyptian did as he was told. Histiaeus, at the first call, brought all the ships to ferry the army and rebuilt the bridge. Thus, the Persians managed to escape from Scythia, but from that time on, the Scythians considered the Ionians the most pathetic cowards of all people, unworthy of the name of free men, as they were devoted to their master like slaves, and not even inclined to flee. With this, let me conclude my story. Goodbye.